October 23, 2019, Glacier County, Montana. Frank Morrison had been alone for exactly 25 years. That's why the security footage made no sense. 3:47 a.m., a massive gray wolf attacking a man in Frank's own driveway, tearing him apart while Frank supposedly slept inside. But Frank wasn't sleeping. He was awake, he was watching, and he didn't hear a sound. The timestamp burned into the bottom corner, October 23, 2019, 3:47 a.m., the 25th anniversary of his daughter Sarah's death. Down to the minute. Someone had been planning this for decades. Someone knew Frank's secrets. Someone knew what really happened the night Sarah died in those woods. And now they were sending him a message written in blood and teeth. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Frank's hands shook as he rewound the footage for the 7th time. The images flickered across his laptop screen in the pre-dawn darkness of his cabin, grainy black and white security feed that shouldn't exist. He'd never installed cameras, never needed them out here, 40 miles from the nearest neighbor. The wolf moved like liquid shadow, massive shoulders rolling as it circled the man in Frank's driveway. Even through the pixelated footage, Frank could see the creature's size was wrong, too big. Wolves in Montana averaged 80 pounds. This thing looked closer to 150, maybe more. Its head was broad as a dinner plate, ears too small, legs too long. But it was the man's face that made Frank's blood freeze. Danny Kowalski. 25 years older, hair gone gray, but definitely Danny. The same rookie park ranger who'd been with them that night in 1994. The same kid who'd asked too many questions afterward. The same witness Frank thought he'd convinced to stay quiet. In the footage, Danny stumbled backward toward Frank's porch steps, one hand pressed to his shoulder where dark stains spread across his jacket. His mouth moved, screaming probably, though the security feed had no audio. The wolf stalked closer, yellow eyes reflecting the porch light like headlamps. Frank paused the video. Danny's face was turned directly toward the camera now, terror etched in every line. But there was something else in his expression, recognition. He wasn't just looking at the wolf. He was looking past it, looking at something or someone the camera couldn't see. Frank's coffee had gone cold hours ago. He'd been sitting here since 4 a.m. when the anonymous email arrived. No sender, no message, just a video file titled Your Turn and a timestamp that matched his worst memory. October 23, 1994, 3:47 a.m. The exact moment he'd made the choice that destroyed everything. He rubbed his eyes, feeling every one of his 58 years. The cabin around him held the accumulated silence of 2.5 decades. No family photos on the mantle. He'd burned those years ago. No personal touches except his camera equipment, lined up on steel shelves like surgical instruments. The tools of his former trade, back when Frank Morrison was somebody. Back when he had a daughter who thought he hung the moon and a wife who still believed in happy endings. Before the grizzly. Before Sarah's screams cut through the Montana wilderness. Before Frank learned that some photographs cost more than their worth. He clicked play again. The wolf moved with unnatural purpose, driving Danny toward the cabin's front door. Not random predator behavior. This was herding, intentional, calculated. At 3:46:23, Danny fell. The wolf was on him instantly, massive jaws clamping down on his throat. But something was wrong with the attack pattern. Frank had photographed predator kills for 30 years, real ones, in the wild. This looked choreographed, too clean. The wolf's positioning blocked the camera's view of the actual contact points. At 3:47 exactly, Danny went still. At 3:47:1, the wolf looked directly into the camera, and Frank's world tilted sideways. Those weren't wolf eyes, they were human eyes, staring through a mask, staring at him across 25 years of carefully buried lies. Frank slammed the laptop shut and reached for the bottle of bourbon he kept in his desk drawer. His hands were steadier now. Fear had a way of focusing him, always had. It's what made him good at his current job, investigating insurance fraud for suspicious claims. He knew how to spot deception because he'd been living one for decades. Someone knew. After 25 years of silence, someone knew what really happened that night. Not the official story he'd told the Park Service, not the version that blamed a rogue grizzly and bad luck. The truth about why he'd left Sarah alone in that tent. The truth about what he'd been doing instead of protecting his daughter. The truth about the choice he'd made when he heard her screaming. Frank opened his laptop again and exported the video file to his external drive. He'd analyze every frame, enhance what he could. Somewhere in that footage was a clue to who sent it. Because this wasn't random, the timing was too perfect, the staging too elaborate. This was personal. Outside his cabin, the October wind howled through the pines like something hunting. Frank had chosen this isolation deliberately, building his exile where the closest neighbors were bears and mountain lions, where he could disappear into the wilderness that had taken everything from him. But the wilderness was done pretending to be empty. Frank pulled on his jacket and stepped onto the porch where Danny Kowalski had supposedly died 6 hours ago. The wooden boards were clean, no blood, no paw prints, no sign of struggle, just a manila envelope tucked under his welcome mat, his name written across it in handwriting he recognized. Sarah's handwriting. Impossible. But there it was, in his dead daughter's careful script for Daddy, who always gets the shot. Frank's hands shook again as he tore open the envelope. Inside was a single photograph, a Polaroid, slightly faded but clear enough. It showed Frank Morrison, 25 years younger, camera in hand, taking pictures while his daughter died 50 feet away. The photograph slipped from Frank's fingers, spiraling down to land face up on the porch boards. Even in the pale morning light, the image was crisp enough to destroy him all over again. There he was, frozen in time. Younger, obsessed, professional to the core. Camera raised, eye pressed to the viewfinder, completely absorbed in capturing the perfect shot of the massive grizzly that had wandered into their camp. In the background, barely visible through the trees, was the orange dome of Sarah's tent. The tent where she'd been sleeping when the bear's mate arrived. The tent where she'd died while her father documented nature's majesty through a telephoto lens. Frank's knees buckled. He sank onto the porch steps, the same boards where Danny Kowalski had allegedly bled out hours earlier. The wood was smooth beneath his palms, worn from decades of mountain weather. No stickiness, no metallic scent of blood, just the clean smell of pine sap and morning frost. Sarah's handwriting stared up at him from the envelope. He'd know those careful loops anywhere. The way she dotted her I's with little circles instead of dots, how she always made her G's too big. She'd practiced that handwriting for hours at the kitchen table, tongue poking out in concentration while Frank graded contact sheets in his dark room. For Daddy, who always gets the shot. She used to say that with such pride. 7 years old, watching him load film cartridges, her small hands mimicking his movements. She'd believed her father was magic, that he could freeze time, capture the soul of the wilderness, show the world things they'd never see otherwise. She didn't understand that some moments shouldn't be preserved, that some shots weren't worth taking. The morning air carried the scent of distant snow. October in Montana meant winter was coming early, and Frank felt it in his bones now more than ever. 58 years of accumulated cold that no fire could warm. He'd chosen this isolation after Rebecca left, after the divorce papers cited irreconcilable differences when what she really meant was irreconcilable grief. She couldn't forgive him for the choice he'd made. He couldn't forgive himself for making it. Frank picked up the photograph with steady hands now. The shock was wearing off, replaced by the analytical mind that had served him through 30 years of wildlife photography and 10 years of insurance investigations. Someone had been planning this for a long time. The video footage, the timing, the envelope delivered precisely when he'd be most vulnerable. It all spoke to careful observation. Patient stalking. But who? Danny Kowalski was the obvious suspect, except Danny was supposedly dead in Frank's driveway 6 hours ago. The Park Service investigation had been closed for decades. Rebecca lived in Seattle now with her second husband, a kind man who'd never lost a child to his own ambition. She'd moved on, found peace, built a new life where October 23rd was just another date on the calendar. The few people who knew the real story were either dead or had reasons to stay quiet. Frank had made sure of that. The wind picked up, sending pine needles skittering across the photograph. Frank studied the image again, looking for clues. The angle suggested it had been taken from ground level, maybe 30 feet away. Long lens, probably 300 millimeters. The photographer had been good. Steady hands, proper exposure despite the low light conditions. This wasn't some amateur with a point-and-shoot camera. This was professional work. Frank's blood chilled. There had been only one other photographer in the area that night, Marcus Webb, the veteran National Geographic shooter who'd been documenting grisly behavior for a cover story. Marcus who'd invited Frank along as a favor to an old friend. Marcus who'd set up camp 2 miles south and promised to stay in his designated area. But Marcus had died 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Frank had seen the obituary in Outdoor Photography magazine, complete with a retrospective of his greatest shots. There had been no mention of October 23, 1994. No reference to the Morrison family tragedy. Marcus had taken that secret to his grave, unless he hadn't. Frank stood, his joints protesting the cold. The sun was climbing higher now, painting the peaks orange and gold. Beautiful light, perfect for photography. The kind of morning that would have sent him scrambling for his camera 25 years ago, back when he believed beauty was worth any price. He looked down at his porch again, imagining Danny Kowalski bleeding out on these same boards. If the video was real, and the production quality suggested it was, then someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to stage an execution. The wolf costume alone would have cost thousands. The security cameras would need to be professionally installed, hidden well enough that Frank hadn't noticed them. This wasn't about money or random revenge. This was about justice. Someone had appointed themselves judge and jury for the Morrison family tragedy, and they were just getting started. Frank pocketed the photograph and envelope, then walked to the edge of his porch. In the distance, a raven cawed, harsh and mocking. The sound echoed off the valley walls, multiplying until it seemed like the whole wilderness was laughing at him. 25 years of hiding was over. The predator had found his scent. Frank was halfway back to his front door when his satellite phone rang. The sound cut through the mountain silence like a blade. In 25 years of self-imposed exile, that phone had rung maybe a dozen times. Insurance company emergencies, the occasional wrong number, his ex-wife calling on their daughter's birthday until she stopped calling at all. Frank stared at the device clipped to his belt, watching the screen pulse with an incoming call from a blocked number. On the 4th ring, he answered. "You found the photograph." The voice was electronically distorted, gender indeterminate, but Frank caught an undertone he recognized. Educated, controlled, patient, good. "I wasn't sure you'd have the stomach to look." Frank's grip tightened on the phone. "Who is this?" "Someone who's been waiting a very long time for this conversation, Frank. 25 years to be exact. I have to admit, your disappearing act was impressive. Montana wilderness, no neighbors, minimal digital footprint. You almost convinced yourself you could outrun October 23rd, didn't you?" The mountain air suddenly felt thinner. Frank's chest constricted as decades of carefully constructed isolation crumbled around him. "What do you want?" "Justice." The word hung between them like a death sentence. For a 7-year-old girl who died while her father chose the perfect shot over her life. For a family destroyed by one man's monstrous priorities. For 25 years of lies. Frank closed his eyes, seeing Sarah's tent in the morning light after the attack. Orange fabric shredded like confetti. Sleeping bags soaked dark. His daughter's pink camp shoes still arranged neatly by the entrance where she'd left them, believing she'd wake up to another day of adventure with the daddy she worshipped. "You don't understand," Frank started. "I understand everything," the electronic voice cut him off. "I understand that you heard the first bear and saw a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a massive grizzly in perfect morning light. I understand that you grabbed your camera instead of checking on Sarah. I understand that when the second bear came into camp, the female, the angry one, you kept shooting instead of screaming a warning. You got your perfect shot, Frank. The question is, was it worth your daughter's life?" Frank's knees gave out. He collapsed onto the porch steps, phone pressed to his ear like a lifeline to hell. This wasn't possible. The only person who could have known those details was Marcus Webb, and Marcus was dead. Frank had made sure the official report blamed equipment failure, a torn tent zipper, bad luck. Even Rebecca never knew the full truth about those crucial 10 minutes. "Marcus?" Frank whispered. A laugh, like grinding glass. Marcus Webb died believing in the code. Brotherhood of the lens, professional courtesy among predators. But people change, Frank, especially when they're dying and have time to think about complicity. The world tilted sideways. Marcus hadn't taken the secret to his grave. He'd passed it on like a torch. But to whom? Who had loved Sarah Morrison enough to spend 3 years planning this elaborate revenge? The video, Frank said. Danny Kowalski. Perfectly fine and completely unaware he was cast in your personal horror film. Green screen technology is remarkable these days. A few shots of him outside his Denver home, some clever editing, and voila, he dies in your driveway on the anniversary of your daughter's murder. Poetic, don't you think? Frank's mind raced through the possibilities. Rebecca had remarried, moved on. Sarah had been too young for close friends who'd carry grudges into adulthood. Extended family had written him off years ago, but someone had cared enough about his dead daughter to orchestrate this psychological warfare with surgical precision. What happens now? Frank asked. Now you face what you've been running from. October 23rd wasn't an accident, Frank. It was a choice. You chose the photograph over your child's life, and you've spent 25 years hiding from that truth. No more hiding, no more excuses, no more lies. The phone screen flickered. A new file had arrived, another video attachment. Frank's thumb hovered over the download button. That's your real homework, the voice continued. Your complete confession. Everything you remember about that morning, every detail you've buried, every lie you've told. You have 48 hours to deliver it to the address I'm sending. If you don't, the footage of Danny Kowalski dies viral with your real story attached. Every news outlet, every photography forum, every corner of the internet where people remember Frank Morrison's reputation. Frank's throat constricted. Why 48 hours? Because October 25th is when the real hunt begins. The line went dead. Frank stared at the phone, watching a new message appear with an address in Whitefish, Montana. 90 minutes away. Close enough to feel like a noose tightening around his neck. He looked up at the peaks surrounding his valley prison, no longer seeing sanctuary but walls. The predator hadn't just found his scent, it had been studying him, learning his patterns, preparing for the perfect moment to strike. Frank Morrison's 25 years of hiding were over. The reckoning had finally come home. Frank sat on his porch steps for another hour, phone dead in his hands, watching the sun climb higher above the valley walls. The mountains that had sheltered him for 2 decades now felt like a trap. Beautiful, serene, inescapable. He kept replaying the distorted voice, searching for clues beneath the electronic distortion. Someone who'd known Marcus Webb. Someone who cared about Sarah enough to wait 3 years planning this. The confession deadline hammered in his skull. 48 hours. October 25th. He needed help, but who could he trust? His contact list had withered to almost nothing, a deliberate choice during his retreat from the world. But there was one name that might still matter. Tom Bradley, his former editor at Wildlife Photography Monthly. They'd worked together for 15 years before Sarah died, back when Frank Morrison meant something in professional circles. Tom had called twice after the funeral, offering assignments, trying to coax him back. Frank had refused both times, then changed his number. But Tom was resourceful, connected. If anyone could track down who might have Marcus Webb's files, it would be him. Frank's hands shook as he dialed directory assistance. The voice was different now, younger, automated. But Tom Bradley was still listed in Missoula, still editing apparently, still believing in the power of captured moments. Bradley. The voice was gruffer than Frank remembered, aged by 25 years of deadlines and disappointments. Tom, it's Frank Morrison. Silence stretched between them like a canyon. Frank could hear keyboard clicking in the background, the familiar chaos of a newsroom. Finally, Jesus. Frank? Where the hell are you calling from? Montana. Listen, you need a lot of things, Frank. Like a time machine and a conscience. You disappeared on us. Just vanished after the funeral like we were all contaminated. Rebecca tried reaching out for months. We all did. The reproach hit harder than Frank expected. He'd forgotten that his exile had casualties beyond his immediate family. Tom had been more than an editor. He'd been a friend. Someone who'd celebrated Frank's successes, covered for his mistakes, believed in his vision even when the shots didn't work. I know, Frank said. I'm sorry. But I need to ask you something. About Marcus Webb. Another pause. Longer this time. When Tom spoke again, his voice had shifted into professional wariness. "Marcus is dead, Frank. 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. You should have been at the funeral. Did he leave anything behind? Files, archives, unpublished work? Why would you care? You've been playing hermit for 25 years. Frank closed his eyes. "Someone has photographs from October 23, 1994. Photos that shouldn't exist. I think Marcus took them." The keyboard clicking stopped. Frank could hear Tom's breathing change, become shallower. "Frank, what kind of trouble are you in?" "The kind that ends badly." "Tom, please, did Marcus leave archives? Who would have access?" "His daughter inherited everything. Maya Webb. She's a documentary filmmaker now, lives in Kalispell. Frank, if someone has photos from that night..." The line went dead. Frank stared at the phone, confusion turning to ice-cold realization. Tom Bradley had hung up on him. Tom, who'd never met a story he wouldn't chase, who'd built his career on getting answers. He'd ended the conversation the moment Frank mentioned Maya Webb, which meant Tom knew something, and whatever he knew scared him enough to cut contact with an old friend. Frank's isolation suddenly felt less like protection and more like blindness. While he'd been hiding in his mountain fortress, the world had continued spinning. Marcus Webb's daughter had grown up, built a career, had access to her father's complete archives, including shots that could destroy what was left of Frank Morrison's reputation. Maya Webb. The name felt familiar, tugging at memory fragments Frank couldn't quite assemble. He'd met her once, maybe twice, back when she was a teenager hanging around Marcus's studio. Dark hair, serious eyes, the kind of kid who listened to adult conversations and remembered everything. She would have been 17 when Marcus died, old enough to inherit secrets along with camera equipment, old enough to understand what those secrets meant for the families they'd shattered. Frank stood slowly, joints protesting the cold and stress. Kalispell was 2 hours away on mountain roads. He could drive there, confront Maya Webb directly, demand answers. But something in Tom's voice warned him against that approach. The conversation had ended too abruptly, with too much fear. Instead, Frank walked back into his cabin and powered up his laptop. If Maya Webb was a documentary filmmaker, she'd have an online presence. Website, social media, professional portfolio. Somewhere in that digital footprint would be clues about her current project. The search results made his blood freeze. Maya Webb's latest documentary was titled The Perfect Shot: Ethics and Obsession in Wildlife Photography. The film's description mentioned never-before-seen archival footage and the hidden cost of professional ambition. The premiere date was October 25th, tomorrow. Frank's 48 hours weren't a random deadline. They were a premiere schedule.